where we were in Matthew chapter 15, talking about what goes into the mouth of a man and into his belly, but the whole thing is that who he was speaking to, Yahshua here, wasn't to a whole bunch of non-believers as far as the letter of the law was concerned, because these people, everybody in Jerusalem, none of them would eat pork, none of them ate the unclean thing. They wouldn't even touch it or anything, so he didn't have to go through the entire law and explain to these people, as he's talking to them, that what goes into a man's mouth, the thought wouldn't even enter their mind. Okay? I mean, it's like, well, let's not even get into those things. We're trying to keep right on this clean and unclean matter, that nobody that the Messiah was speaking to when he was talking about what goes into a man's mouth will defile him, but the thoughts, the intents of the heart that come out of a man, that does defile him if it's not according to the scriptures and the law and the commandments. And he was here in verse 14 of chapter 15 of Matthew. He says he was talking to about the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the priests, the leaders, the teachers, the rabbis, which still stands today. And it says, let them alone, they are blind guides of the blind, and if the blind man guides a blind man, both will fall into a pit. So they're both going to fall into a pit, and this doesn't mean they're going to lose salvation. Even if they died when they fell into the pit, that's what the second resurrection is for all those. These people were not there to acquire salvation at the time. They were there to test those who were given the opportunity for salvation to see if they could turn these men, or if their hearts would stay strong. And I did the stupidest thing when I was first called out into the faith, when I first started understanding the truth, because I love King David. I read so many stories about this man, and it even said that he was a man after Yahweh's own heart. So out of my stupidity, and I'm saying, please don't ask this, because if you're heard, buddy boy, I'm going to tell you what, your life is going to turn to crapola before your eyes. But I had prayed that Yahweh test and try me, as he did King David, to see if my heart was true and if it would stay strong in my Father Yahweh. Oh, don't do that, okay? So anyway, here in verse 15 of chapter 15 of Matthew, and Keith answered and said to him, explain the parable to us. So he wants to know about, that which goes into a man's mouth and comes out of him doesn't defile him, but what comes out of a man's heart defiles him. And Yahshua said, are you still lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that everything that goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is eliminated? He is not even insinuating, this is talking about a clam, an oyster, a possum or a skunk, a vulture, or a piece of pork. He's not talking anything about this. He's talking lawful things. Why would the Messiah never taught sin? Okay? And because the Messiah never taught sin, he's not teaching that you can eat sinful things. Yahshua, you can ask any preacher, they'll all tell you straight out that Yahshua never sinned, and no, he never ate a piece of pork, or a pork chop, or a piece of catfish, or any of the unclean things. He didn't go out defiling himself with these things. He didn't wear leather sandals, made out of pigskin. He didn't do these things. He kept the law. So he's not even considering to teach everybody the entire law here. These are people living in Jerusalem that are expected to already be keeping the law and walking in it. Of course, it was the letter of the law. The spirit of the law never really came about until Yahshua's death and his resurrection, when he conquered death. He conquered the death of the law for anyone who would believe and walk in the law the way that he did. Then they would not have death. And he promises that. So he said in verse 17, do you not understand that everything that goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and isn't eliminated? But the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and those defile the man. For out of the heart came evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications. Well, you can't eat, evil thoughts. You can't eat murders. You can't eat adulteries. You can't eat fornications. Thefts, false witness, slanders. These are the things which defile the man. But to eat with unwashed hands, and this is what it was all actually about, because these scribes and Pharisees said, oh, why don't your disciples keep the traditions that we made and added to the law? Then when a man eats, he has to wash his hands 3 times before he can eat. All our forefathers taught us these things, though it's not in your law there, Yahshua. We were taught these traditions, and why don't your disciples follow our traditions, our fathers' traditions, the burdens we put on the necks of men who are seeking you? Why don't they follow these things too? But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile the man. And Yahshua went away, and there he withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, the Canaanite woman came out from that region and began to cry out, saying, have mercy on me, O Yahshua, son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed. Okay, now this isn't a spirit from old Uncle Josh that jumped into this woman. No. All the spirits and the ghosts, the spooks, the orbs, all these supernatural things that are occurring in people's homes and their lives, these possessions. See, I want to be possessed. I'm choosing to be possessed, but not by the spirit or an angel of Satan. I choose to be possessed by Holy Spirit and by Yahshua Messiah and my Father Yahweh as well. That's what I want to be possessed with. Now this child was possessed with an unclean spirit, a spirit from Satan the devil. When you die, it's like batteries taken out of a camera. The camera's not going to work until batteries are put back in, and you're not going to get anything off that camera unless you've got power to it. So when you're in the grave, you don't know a single thing, not until the second resurrection, or if you're blessed, the first. And his disciples, this is verse 23 of chapter 15 of Matithia, but he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came to him and kept asking him, saying, send her away, for she is shouting out after us. But he answered and said, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which are the Gentiles. But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, O ruler, help me. And he answered and said, it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. So he's calling this woman a dog. And what do dogs do? Well, they'll eat their own poop, they'll eat their own vomit, they'll eat poop of other dogs. They eat all sorts of unclean things. You throw a piece of meat, regardless of what it is, a dog will gobble it right on up. And what goes into the mouth of that dog, yes, it defiles the dog, and that's why the dog is considered unclean. It is defiled. But those that keep the law know they're to eat only clean foods and not touch the unclean, and Yahweh will accept you, just like it talks about in Corinthians. Okay, and it talks about those that will not touch the unclean. If you don't touch the unclean, then you'll be accepted. It says it right straight out. We'll get into that later on in another video. Verse 27, but she said, yes, ruler, but even the dogs. She's acknowledging to him that she is a dog. She's got no problem with it. She understands she's less than a worm. She's less than the worm poop under a worm right now, which I am as well. I'm nothing. I'm nothing at all. I simply have words that come out of me because I've given myself to Yahshua. I trust in him fully. Okay, every word comes out my mouth. If he didn't put it there, I don't know where it came from. But everything that you hear me say, you'll find right in these scriptures. If you look, if you know the law, and you know the commandments, and the will of our Father, and his plan, that it don't matter who lived and died. If they were unrighteous, they will have an opportunity They never had an opportunity while they were living 1,000 years ago. Nobody knew anything about the truth. They're teaching to eat unclean things where that's not acceptable. And these things were to be made known in these last days. And yes, it's a very difficult challenge to get somebody to come out of the world, like it tells you to do. Come out from among her, do not partake in her sins. Okay, or they'll be added unto you. But that's in the last days. It had nothing to do with 100 years ago. That's these present times where Yahweh is now bringing judgments on the earth. And they're going to come. I just hope that you have ears to hear and eyes to see. I hope your heart and your ears are circumcised, and your eyes if you're reading. But she said, yes, ruler, but even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from their ruler's table. Then Yahshua answered and said to her, O woman, your faith is great. Be it done for you as you desire. And her daughter was healed at once. Okay, so we've got a reiteration of that here in Mark chapter 7. And verse 13 we'll start with. Okay, well first Yahshua was discussing in the previous verses of this chapter 7 all the way up to verse 11 where he's talking about how children have basically been dedicated to the service of the priests and such, so therefore the children no longer need to keep the law of our Father that tells a child, okay, all these old folk homes and everything else, that's not what was commanded for us to do. We were supposed to take care of our parents. They were supposed to live right with us, and a lot of farming families here in America today do that. They keep their grandparents or great-grandparents as old as they are, even if they're up in a bed and you gotta clean up their butts and everything because they don't have the strength to get out and empty what goes into their mouth and comes out in the draft. They do it right in the bed sometimes because they're so old and they can't take care of themselves. But that's a children's responsibility. It's not the responsibility of an old folks home. It's not the insurance company's responsibility to pay for your accidents. No, the law says that if you cause somebody damage, you are to repay it back. But because of these insurance companies and what they've done, and now the law of the land, Satan's rule, mandates that you have insurance on your vehicle, and there's a lot of people out there still breaking man's law, but what that has done is take away the responsibility from anybody. They don't pay attention half the time to what they're doing because they know, oh, well, if I have an accident, well, insurance will pay. Where instead it's like, oh man, I better not have an accident because if I'm at fault, I have to pay. See, so it removes that responsibility, but that's not what the law done, and that's not what should be done. That's talking right here in the beginning of this chapter, and Yahshua even says, but you say, if a man says to his father or his mother, anything of mine you might have helped by is korban. That is to say, given to Yahweh. So, I don't have to help you, and the priests and the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes and the holy men and the rabbis of those days all said, oh, it's true, that law to take care of your parents and such, oh, that don't matter anymore because this man's in service to Yahweh. So whatever he does here, it is a benefit to Yahweh and not to the parents. No, that's not at all what was supposed to have been done. In verse 12 in Mark 7, it says, you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or his mother, thus invalidating the word of Yahweh by your tradition which you have handed down, and you do many things such as that. So Yahshua here at the beginning of this chapter is speaking to everybody that already knows they're supposed to be keeping and living by the word of Yahweh, but they're not, and he's explaining where they're not. But then he gets into this mouth thing again, and this belly, and then what comes out the heart. Verse 14, and after he called the multitude to him again, he began saying to them, listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside the man which going into him can defile him. Okay, now once again, I've already challenged the lying preachers out there of this world to just eat a little centipede. You can cook it up in a pot of soup. There's been people here in Texas that have eaten armadillos. They found a family here just a couple years ago, and it goes on most every year anyway, but this one case I'm particularly knowledgeable about, where this family killed and ate an armadillo because the Lord cleansed it for them to eat. Well, they gutted the thing. They threw the intestines and the stomach out into the trash, but when the police came, they was all sitting around this table, very little eating of their meal, and every one of them dead. So they checked the garbage, and guess what? Yeah, that armadillo ate a centipede, and because it ate the centipede, the poisons went inside its meat, which is okay. That's why that armadillo was created and why it's unclean for you to eat. But these folks believing, and they prayed to the Lord before they ate, they was all dead around the table just because that armadillo ate a centipede. So you eat a centipede and pray to the Lord first. I want to see it. Then I'll believe that everything's unclean, is cleansed from the unclean, okay? Because Yahshua's not saying that at all. So the man which going into can defile him, but the things which proceed out of the man are what defile the man. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. It's not talking to everyone, it's just those with a circumcised ear. And when leaving the multitude he had entered the house, his disciples questioned him about the parable. And he said to them, Are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that whatever goes into a man from outside cannot defile him? Because he's only going to eat the clean according to the law. He's not having to reteach the clean and the unclean. These people were born keeping it. Their parents didn't give them a piece of pork when they was needing a bottle of milk. And they didn't have bottles back then. They had breast of milk. And the mama wasn't eating pork to pass it on to the child. Because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach, and is eliminated. Thus, and this is in parentheses and italicized, thus he declared all foods clean. Now where in the world did this idiot that wrote this, added this to the scriptures? Now this man may not have salvation, because it talks of those that add to the scriptures or take away, they will be taken from the book of life. And it talks about that in Revelations, one of the very last chapters in that book. Because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach, and is eliminated. Thus he declared all foods clean. What an idiot. And he was saying, that which proceeds out of the man, that is what defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed the evil thoughts, fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of the